December 1944. The Pacific War is ending, but for hundreds of captured Japanese soldiers, the battle has already collapsed into a silence more frightening than gunfire. Trucks grind up a dusty road toward a fenced compound somewhere in the American-controlled islands. Inside the vehicles, men sit motionless, wrists bound loosely, eyes downcast. They have been told many things about what awaits them: starvation, humiliation, perhaps execution. None of them expects mercy. When the convoy halts, the prisoners step into blinding sunlight. Barbed wire glitters in neat rows. Wooden guard towers rise above the camp like watchful eyes. At the gate, American sentries shout brisk orders the men cannot fully understand. Their uniforms, once proud khaki, hang in tatters. Sweat, mildew, and dust cling to the fabric. The smell of the tropics and of long defeat surrounds them. Processing begins at once. Names are recorded, dog tags collected, temperatures taken. Medics move with mechanical efficiency, inspecting mouths, ears, and open wounds. For the prisoners, this precision is bewildering. They had imagined capture as chaos. Instead, it feels like entering a machine that runs on invisible rules. One by one, the men are issued cloth bundles, soap, towels, undergarments, and pointed toward a large wooden building from which steam drifts through the slats. Inside, pipes snake across the ceiling. Rows of metal nozzles glint in the light. Beneath them, grated drains wait like open mouths. The sight stops many of the prisoners where they stand. They whisper in confusion. Some clutch their bundles tighter. The air smells faintly of detergent and iron. A guard gestures impatiently, motioning for them to undress. At first, no one moves. To strip in front of strangers feels unbearable, a loss of the last shred of dignity. In the Imperial Army, dirt was accepted as armor, endurance meant pride. Bathing was a memory from another life, one of wooden tubs, family rituals, and the warmth of home. Now, ordered to remove their uniforms under the eyes of armed enemies, the men feel exposed in a way the battlefield never managed. The guards repeat the gesture, sharper this time. Belts fall, tunics slide to the floor, pale skin and bruised shoulders show under the harsh bulbs. A few men mutter that perhaps this is punishment, that they will be sprayed with chemicals or worse. The rumor spreads in seconds. Maybe the Americans use these showers to kill. No one truly believes it, yet no one can dismiss it either. Fear tightens every movement. Then the first valve opens. A hiss fills the room and water bursts from the nozzles in gleaming arcs. Steam billows upward. The men flinch, bracing for pain, but what strikes them is heat, clean and steady. The water runs over their backs and faces, washing away the crusted sweat of months. For a moment, the entire hall freezes in stunned silence. Then cautiously, someone begins to rub the coarse bar of soap along his arms. Another follows. Within minutes, the sound of running water and low murmurs replaces the tension. Dirt swirls down the drains in dark ribbons. It is the first time many have felt warmth without fear attached to it. The sensation is disorienting, almost guilty. Their minds race to make sense of it. Why would the enemy offer comfort? Could it be mockery, a trick before harsher treatment? Yet the water keeps flowing, constant and generous. A corporal who once marched through New Guinea's jungles stares upward, mouth open, letting the stream hit his face until his eyes sting. He cannot remember the last time he had been allowed to feel clean. When the guards finally shout for them to finish, the men step from the spray, dripping and speechless. On tables near the exit lie stacks of folded towels, thick, white and soft. They pick them up hesitantly, pressing the unfamiliar fabric against their skin. The warmth clings even as the air cools. Outside, under the glaring sky, they dress in laundered fatigues issued from the camp stores. Their bodies feel lighter, almost foreign. No one speaks during the march back to the barracks. The silence is heavy, filled with questions that have no answer. Were the showers mercy or manipulation? In the dim interior of the wooden huts, the men sit on benches, towels still in their hands, steam still rising from their hair. The fear that had hardened them through years of battle begins to loosen, but uncertainty rushes in to replace it. They remember what officers had said before surrender, that Americans despised prisoners, that capture meant degradation, that death was preferable. Yet these same Americans have provided soap and hot water. The contradiction gnaws at them. Some whisper theories, perhaps the guards wish to make them soft, to break their spirit through unexpected kindness. Others stay silent, eyes lowered, unwilling to admit that the experience had felt, if only for a heartbeat, like relief. That night the barracks hum with restless breathing. Outside, the camp lights burn in rigid rows. A faint smell of soap lingers in the air, mixing with damp wood and the salt of the ocean wind. The men lie awake, replaying the moment the first drops hit their skin. None can forget it. It was the instant when fear and comfort collided, when everything they believed about the enemy began, however slightly, to crack. Morning comes with the clang of the camp bell. The prisoners wake under blankets that smell faintly of detergent. Outside, dew steams off the gravel paths, and the same guards who shouted at them yesterday now line them up again, clipboards in hand. The routine begins: roll call, inspection, and another march toward the steaming building of pipes. It is no longer a mystery what waits inside, yet unease lingers. The memory of surrender is still raw. The idea of obedience feels like salt in an open wound. This time, though, fear is quieter. The men move more quickly when told to undress. They hold the rough bars of soap already softened from yesterday's use. The hiss of the valves fills the hall and warm water pours down once more. What had seemed threatening now feels strangely orderly, almost merciful. Hands scrub harder, backs arch under the steady spray. Dirt yields to pink skin. Laughter, nervous and brief, echoes between the walls. The guards watch impassively, timing each group, their manner brisk but not cruel. To the Americans, this is ordinary hygiene. The camp's medical officers have orders based on the Geneva Convention. Every prisoner must bathe regularly, be deloused, and receive medical checks. Disease is the enemy now: typhus, dysentery, malaria, not the men behind the wire. Clean prisoners mean fewer outbreaks, fewer corpses, fewer reports to write. For them, it is logistics. For the Japanese soldiers under the showerheads, it is revelation. They study the pipes as they wash, astonished that the system delivers endless hot water. In the jungles of the Pacific, even drinking water had been rationed drop by drop. Bathing was a luxury reserved for officers, sometimes a single bucket passed among dozens. The concept of plumbing, heat controlled by valves, drainage that carries filth away, seems like magic drawn from another world. The more they observe it, the more it unsettles them. How could a nation invest such effort in cleanliness when fighting a global war? How could it spare hot water for captives? When they return to their barracks, interpreters explain through halting Japanese that showers are mandatory. Clean body, healthy body, one medic repeats, pointing to a chart covered with drawings of lice and germs. The words sound simple, almost childish, yet they carry authority. The Americans treat hygiene as law, not kindness. It is discipline expressed through water and soap. Among the prisoners, whispers continue. Some remain suspicious, convinced that this generosity hides another purpose. Others begin to sense something deeper, that the Americans' order and abundance come from a structure larger than individual goodwill. It is civilization running on systems rather than emotion. That realization both fascinates and shames them. At night, they compare the experience with the life they knew in the Imperial Army. A former sergeant remembers months on Guadalcanal when his men bathed in muddy streams thick with leeches. Another tells of washing blood from his hands with sand because soap was forbidden waste. They speak quietly, voices low in the dim barracks, and for the first time they admit that perhaps endurance alone had not been strength. Days blend together, the routine repeats with military precision. Soap is issued, towels collected, water measured but plentiful. Inspections follow: hair, fingernails, bedding, seams. Delousing powder coats their uniforms in pale dust. Each step strips away another layer of the jungle's memory. The men notice their bodies healing, scabs drying, rashes fading, the constant itch of parasites disappearing. The change is undeniable. Their reflection in tin cups shows faces less hollow, eyes less wild. Yet the transformation is not only physical. Slowly, they begin to see the pattern behind the camp's rhythm. Cleanliness, order, punctuality, these are not indulgences but expressions of control. The Americans enforce them as strictly as they once enforced drill and salute. For Japanese soldiers raised to worship discipline, this strikes a deep chord. Their captors, it seems, possess a discipline of a different kind, one that seeks not to harden the body through pain but to preserve it through care. Still, pride resists. In private, some mutter that this comfort is a weapon designed to soften them, to erase the warrior spirit that once defined their lives. They wrap these thoughts around themselves like armor, but when the next roll call sounds and the guards march them toward the showers again, none refuse. The promise of warmth is stronger than resentment. Inside, steam fogs the mirrors fixed along the far wall. Drops gather and fall in rhythm. The men stand beneath the spray, eyes closed, and the moment feels suspended outside of war. The hiss of water drowns out memories of gunfire. In that noise, for a fleeting instant, there is peace, an unfamiliar peace born not of victory but of cleanliness. By the second week, even the guards notice the change. The prisoners line up faster, speak less in fearful tones. The medics remark that skin infections have dropped, that the camp smells less of sweat and sickness. Reports go to headquarters confirming that hygiene procedures are effective. The paperwork says nothing about the psychological effect, the quiet astonishment that spreads each time the valves open, but it is there, unrecorded yet powerful. At mealtime, conversations turn practical. Men discuss which soap lathers best, how to dry towels so they last longer, which corner of the hall stays warmest when the wind blows through the slats. What began as an imposed ritual has become a subject of daily interest, even pride. Cleanliness has transformed from humiliation into habit. In the evenings, as the sun sinks beyond the wire and the sky turns copper, the men sit outside the barracks to catch the cooling breeze. Their hair, once matted, now shines in the fading light. A few even joke about competing to see who can stay cleanest. Laughter, rare and uneasy, ripples through the group. It is the sound of men rediscovering fragments of normal life. They still do not trust the Americans entirely, but a subtle shift has occurred. The enemy who was supposed to be monstrous appears methodical, even civilized. The same guards who bark orders also hand out soap. The same system that imprisons them also heals their sores. The contradiction gnaws at their understanding of the world. If cruelty and cleanliness can coexist within the same walls, perhaps the boundaries between good and evil are less absolute than they had been taught to believe. In this small daily act, standing naked under streams of hot water, the prisoners glimpse something they cannot yet name: the power of a society that values health as much as honor, organization as much as courage. It is a power built not on ideology but on infrastructure. Pipes, valves, pressure gauges, soap factories, these are weapons of another kind, quieter but no less decisive. They realize that such systems, invisible during the heat of battle, may have won the war as surely as bullets and bombs. The discovery unsettles them. They return to their bunks wrapped in issued blankets, skin clean, minds restless. They have survived combat only to face a different kind of revelation. The realization that defeat can teach as brutally as victory. Even as routine settled over the camp, unease lingered like a shadow behind every act of order. Clean skin did not erase the memory of surrender, and obedience did not dissolve suspicion. Beneath the surface calm, whispers continued to circulate among the prisoners, soft, fearful murmurs that the Americans' kindness concealed something sinister. The showers became the center of that anxiety. They were too efficient, too generous, too foreign to be trusted. When steam rose from the pipes and filled the hall with a ghostly haze, some men imagined hidden chemicals mixed with the water. The soap, with its sharp, unfamiliar scent, was unlike anything from Japan. Rumors grew that perhaps the enemy used it to weaken them, to erode their bodies from within. Each rumor was met with silence, then nervous agreement. Few believed it entirely, but fear, once planted, needed little nourishment to thrive. One evening, as the prisoners lined up outside the bathhouse, a young interpreter overheard a group whispering the words "gas chamber." He froze, understanding the danger of that fear. Turning to the nearest guard, he explained what the men were saying. The guard frowned, sighed, and called for the camp medic. Within minutes, an impromptu demonstration began. The medic walked to the front, turned the valve, and stepped under the spray fully clothed. Water cascaded down his uniform, soaking his hair, his boots. He grinned, shouting over the hiss, "See, just water." For the prisoners watching, the sight was both absurd and reassuring. Nervous laughter rippled through the line. The tension eased, though not entirely. Fear that deep never vanished in a single gesture. The misunderstanding ran deeper than words. To the Americans, the showers were practical, a measure to control disease and maintain order. To the Japanese, they carried emotional and spiritual weight. Bathing in Japan had always been ritual as much as hygiene, a cleansing of the soul, a return to purity. The public bathhouse, the onsen, the family tub, all were places of reflection and community. But war had stripped that away. Soldiers in the field had come to see dirt as proof of endurance. To be unwashed was to be hardened, devoted, unbreakable. Now their captors forced them to wash as a matter of routine, with no ceremony, no privacy, no reverence. It felt mechanical, almost dehumanizing. Yet it was impossible to deny the results. The sores that once festered on legs and arms began to heal. The lice that crawled through uniforms vanished. Food tasted better when the smell of filth no longer lingered in their noses. They felt stronger, though they could not bring themselves to call it gratitude. Still, some resisted internally, muttering that the Americans wanted to make them soft, to replace warrior discipline with comfort. A few refused to scrub properly until guards forced them back under the spray, gesturing impatiently until the soap lathered on their skin. Others stood stiffly, eyes closed, performing the task as if it were punishment rather than care. The camp medics noted their hesitation. Reports mentioned psychological resistance to hygiene. They wrote that Japanese prisoners viewed bathing as humiliation, that they must be re-educated to see it as health. To the Americans, it was another logistical challenge. To the prisoners, it was an existential one. In the barracks, long after lights out, conversations unfolded in low voices. Men argued quietly about what the showers meant. Some claimed they were proof of American deceit, a strategy to disguise control as compassion. Others countered that perhaps this was simply how the enemy lived, that their abundance allowed them to extend even such luxuries to captives. The arguments rarely ended in agreement, but each discussion chipped away at old certainties. One former naval mechanic from Yokosuka remembered how officers had mocked Allied propaganda leaflets that showed smiling prisoners being fed and washed. He had believed those leaflets were lies, tools of manipulation. Now he sat in the dim light of the barracks, his hair still damp from the day's shower, and wondered if truth had been hiding inside the enemy's message all along. The guards enforced the hygiene schedule with unrelenting precision. Every man was required to attend every week. Delousing powder was dusted into uniforms, bedding was boiled, wooden floors scrubbed with carbolic solution. The Americans approached cleanliness with military rigor, the same way they approached logistics, food supply, or ammunition storage. For them, it was a kind of warfare against disease fought with soap instead of bullets. Gradually, this logic began to impress even the most skeptical prisoners. They saw how order extended from the smallest details: meals served at fixed hours, tools arranged in straight lines, inspections that never varied. There was a rhythm to it, a rhythm that kept everything running. It was unlike the chaos they had known in the field, where shortages and improvisation ruled. Here, nothing was improvised. Even the showers had a schedule, and the schedule never failed. Still, pride wrestled with understanding. The same men who once swore to die rather than surrender now found themselves obeying American hygiene commands without resistance. Each step in the line felt like another reminder of defeat. Yet with every bath, with every towel folded neatly back onto the rack, their resentment dulled. Cleanliness began to feel not like submission but survival. The transformation did not go unnoticed. American officers observed that discipline among Japanese prisoners was unusually high once hygiene routines stabilized. The prisoners cleaned their barracks with care, swept paths, even maintained their own latrines without complaint. It was as if cleanliness had rekindled something deep in their cultural memory, a respect for order that transcended national boundaries. One guard, writing in his diary, described the change with quiet wonder. "They were silent, fearful men when they arrived," he wrote, "but once we got them washed and shaved, they began to hold themselves straighter. I think they remembered what it was to feel human again." The showers, once symbols of fear, had become bridges between two civilizations that had tried to annihilate each other. Yet this bridge was fragile. For every man who accepted the new order, another still whispered doubts. The contradiction was too large to reconcile easily. An enemy capable of such destruction, also capable of such cleanliness, such order, such humanity. Even those who adapted could not entirely escape the sting of irony. The warmth of the water reminded them of home, of the family baths that now existed only in memory, of mothers scrubbing the backs of sons who would one day march to war. Standing beneath American pipes, they felt both comfort and grief. the sensation of civilization restored and pride undone. In time, they would learn that these showers were not acts of charity but policy, written into manuals and enforced by regulation. The Americans did not wash prisoners to show kindness. They washed them because order demanded it. But to men who had lived through the filth and chaos of jungle warfare, that distinction mattered little. Whether born of compassion or bureaucracy, the result was the same. They were clean, alive, and forced to reconsider everything they had believed about strength. Weeks turned into months, and the routine of captivity hardened into rhythm. The prisoners woke to the clang of the camp bell, lined up for roll call, ate their measured rations, and at the appointed hour marched once more toward the shower hall. The ritual no longer inspired fear or suspicion. It had become as inevitable as the sunrise. They stripped without hesitation, the motions practiced and precise. Steam filled the room before the first man stepped under the spray. The water hissed, the sound echoing off concrete walls, blending with murmured voices and the soft thud of feet on wet floors. The guards no longer needed to shout. Each man knew his place, his turn, his towel folded in the same neat square afterward. The chaos of arrival had vanished. In its place stood something that looked almost like discipline. For the Americans, it was proof that the system worked. Hygiene reduced illness, and healthy prisoners caused fewer problems. Camp medics kept meticulous charts showing drops in skin infections and dysentery. They noted fewer lice infestations, fewer fevers, fewer deaths. Reports filed back to headquarters praised the success of sanitary measures, but statistics could not measure what was happening inside the prisoners themselves. For them, the transformation was subtler and stranger. Their bodies changed first. The constant itching that had tormented them since the island subsided. Wounds that once refused to close now knit cleanly. The dull ache in their joints faded as rest and nutrition repaired what war had broken. They began to walk with steadier steps, to stand taller. And as their bodies healed, so too did something less visible, the sense of identity that filth and despair had stripped away. It was an irony none could ignore. In captivity, they had found a kind of restoration their own army had denied them. The American camp, with its schedules and inspections, treated cleanliness not as luxury but as duty. In the Imperial Army, endurance of hardship had been sacred. Soldiers had been told that pain proved loyalty, that filth was proof of strength. Now, standing beneath streams of hot water, they began to suspect that true strength might mean something else entirely. They spoke of it quietly, never in front of guards. During evening rest, men compared memories of life in the field. One remembered how his unit on New Guinea had gone 3 months without a proper bath, washing only in rainwater collected in helmets. Another described comrades who died not from bullets but from ulcers that rotted through their legs. They all remembered the smell, sweat, mildew, infection that clung to every march, every night in a foxhole. To live clean now felt like awakening from a long nightmare. Even their surroundings began to change. The barracks, once heavy with the odor of unwashed bodies, grew lighter. The wooden floors shone faintly from regular scrubbing. Blankets, laundered weekly, smelled faintly of soap. Guards who entered the huts no longer wrinkled their noses. A small, grudging respect began to form on both sides, respect born not of friendship but of order understood. The showers had become more than hygiene. They were the pulse of the camp, the invisible line separating chaos from control. When water pressure dropped or pipes clogged, the entire rhythm faltered and tempers rose. The prisoners themselves began to complain if the schedule slipped. The very men who once feared the showers now demanded them. One afternoon, after a day of heavy labor clearing brush near the perimeter, a sudden tropical storm swept through the camp. The guards announced that the showers would be postponed until morning because the water system had flooded. A murmur of disappointment spread through the ranks. Men looked down at their mud-caked arms, their sweat-soaked clothes, and realized how deeply the habit had taken root. The routine they had once dreaded had become the only comfort they could count on. The camp doctors observed this change with interest. "They've internalized it," one wrote. "Hygiene is no longer an order, it's identity." He was right. For the prisoners, cleanliness had come to mean dignity, the last possession that captivity could not confiscate. When they scrubbed their skin until it glowed, when they folded their towels in perfect squares, they were not serving their captors. They were reclaiming fragments of humanity. The Americans, pragmatic and unsentimental, never noticed the depth of that shift. To them, the showers were simple maintenance. To the Japanese, they were quiet redemption. Each time water cascaded over their bodies, it carried away not just dirt but shame, the shame of defeat, of surrender, of being told they were less than men. In the act of washing, they found a strange, unspoken form of resistance, to remain human in a place built to remind them they were not free. As health returned, so did conversation. The barracks buzzed with quiet debate. Some prisoners argued that the Americans' obsession with order revealed their weakness, that a soldier softened by comfort could never endure true hardship. Others countered that perhaps this order was the source of American power. They fight with machines, one man said, but their machines obey because their people obey. The words hung in the air, unsettling and undeniable. In time, even pride began to bend. Men who once sneered at soap now reminded younger captives to scrub properly. They corrected one another's habits, enforced punctuality, ensured that towels were folded correctly before inspection. The discipline they had once directed toward battle now flowed into hygiene. The line between obedience and adaptation blurred until no one could tell which it was. Beyond the fences, the war raged on, but news came slowly. When rumors spread that Japan had suffered heavy losses, the prisoners fell silent. They gathered in small groups, whispering of families back home, of the cities they feared might be burning. Yet even in those moments the camp routine held. No matter the news, the bell still rang, the showers still opened, and the water still poured. The world might be collapsing, but inside the wire the rhythm continued. For some, that constancy became a strange comfort. It meant that life, however narrow, still followed rules. Cleanliness was proof that the world had not yet dissolved entirely into chaos. They began to understand the deeper meaning of the American system. Order was not just control, it was survival. A society capable of maintaining hygiene even in war was a society built to endure. The realization was humbling. Many could not put it into words, but they felt it deeply each time they watched the water spiral down the drains. It was civilization made visible. Pipes and valves might seem trivial, yet behind them lay factories, engineers, transport lines, a vast machinery of supply that reached across oceans. Every drop of hot water that fell on their shoulders was proof of a world that worked, a system too large and efficient to imagine. At night, lying clean beneath their blankets, they thought of their own army's shortages, empty fuel tanks, rotten rice, broken rifles. They thought of comrades who had died not from bullets but from disease. And they could not help but see in these showers the reflection of something far greater than hygiene. It was a glimpse of why they had lost. The thought was painful, but it carried clarity. America's strength did not rest only on its weapons, but on its capacity to care for order, to value cleanliness, to sustain its soldiers, and even its enemies with the same mechanical consistency. The showers had taught them that, not through lectures or propaganda, but through the simple, undeniable rhythm of water. By the time the first cold winds swept across the camp, the prisoners were no longer the same men who had arrived months earlier. They were cleaner, stronger, and quieter. Their skin shone where once it had cracked. Their eyes, though still shadowed by defeat, held a faint glimmer of understanding. In the strange, regulated world of captivity, they had discovered that dignity could survive in unexpected places, even in the enemy's shower halls. When the war finally ended, and news of Japan's surrender swept across the camp, a heavy silence fell. The prisoners stood motionless during roll call, eyes downcast as the American officer read the official announcement. There was no cheering, no open grief, only the strange stillness of men who no longer knew who they were. The empire they had sworn to die for was gone. The officers who had promised honor in death were silent now. All that remained was survival. In the weeks that followed, as the process of repatriation began, the showers continued. The same valves turned, the same steam rose, the same warm water flowed over bodies that were cleaner and stronger than they had been in years. The routine persisted until the very last day. It had become, in its quiet way, the heartbeat of their captivity. When they were finally told they would be returning home, many felt a mixture of relief and unease. Relief that freedom waited beyond the ocean. Unease because captivity, for all its humiliation, had become familiar. The idea of stepping into an uncertain Japan, bombed, starving, and broken, filled them with dread. Within the wire there had been food, order, cleanliness. Beyond it there was only ruin. On their final day in camp, they bathed one last time. It was a ritual performed in silence. The same soap, the same warm water, the same scent of disinfectant and metal. Some lingered longer under the streams, eyes closed, hands pressed against the walls as though trying to memorize the sensation. It was the last act of a strange chapter in their lives, a chapter of defeat but also of revelation. When the trucks arrived to take them to the ships, the Americans handed out towels and small paper-wrapped bars of soap for the journey. Many prisoners held onto them for months afterward, relics of an experience too complex to explain. They had come to the camp filthy, fearful, convinced they would be tortured. They left it clean, alive, and carrying within them the memory of hot water falling from pipes. Years later, when historians interviewed former prisoners, the showers appeared again and again in their testimonies. Not the food, not the labor details, not even the guards, but the showers. They spoke of them as something unforgettable, almost sacred in their strangeness. They remembered the first shock of warmth, the confusion, the fear of poison, and the slow realization that it was all real, that the enemy truly gave them comfort. One former infantryman, interviewed in 1956, said quietly, "I learned the war was over for me the first time I saw steam rising from that water." Another recalled how he had not touched soap in a year before his capture. "I thought they would kill us," he said. "Instead, they made us wash. I did not know what to think." For these men, the showers became symbols of something larger than hygiene. They were evidence of a civilization that had mastered abundance, a world where cleanliness and order extended even to those who had fought against it. The realization strung deeply. It forced them to confront the weakness of their own military system, where endurance had been mistaken for strength, and where the body had been treated as expendable. In post-war Japan, as cities rebuilt and new industries rose, many of those former prisoners found themselves haunted by memories of the camp's hygiene. They installed baths in their homes whenever they could afford it, insisting on cleanliness as daily ritual. They taught their children that soap was not luxury but necessity. The habits of captivity followed them into peacetime, reshaping quiet corners of civilian life. Historians would later note that Japan's post-war obsession with sanitation, hygiene, and public health found its roots in these experiences. Thousands of men had returned from captivity with first-hand knowledge of Western standards. They had lived inside the systems of the very nation that defeated them, and found, to their surprise, not barbarism, but efficiency. Their memories of hot showers and sterilized barracks became unspoken lessons in modernization. Yet beneath that practical legacy lingered a more personal truth. For many, the memory of those showers was tangled with shame. They had entered them as soldiers of the emperor, stripped of rank, of purpose, of pride. They had stood naked before their enemies and been cleansed not by honor but by defeat. And yet in that humiliation they had felt something they could not deny, the restoration of their humanity. It was an unbearable contradiction, one that no medal or apology could resolve. In conversations decades later, some spoke of it with bitterness, others with gratitude. A few never mentioned it at all. But whether spoken or buried, the memory endured, the hiss of the pipes, the scent of soap, the strange mixture of fear and peace that came with each bath. It was the sound of a world collapsing and another beginning. The Americans who had run those camps rarely understood the depth of what they had done. For them, the showers were routine maintenance, part of the daily checklist alongside rations and roll call. They never saw the quiet transformations happening behind the steam, the way cleanliness softened hatred, the way order restored broken spirits. To the guards, it was just water. To the prisoners, it was revelation. As the decades passed and the war receded into memory, the story of the showers faded from official histories. It survived instead in fragments, in diaries, in interviews, in the words of men who struggled to explain how something so simple could feel so profound. They spoke of it as one of the strangest paradoxes of their lives. That captivity, meant to strip them of dignity, had instead reminded them what dignity was. Some historians would later call it a psychological turning point, the moment when many Japanese prisoners first glimpsed the scale of America's power. Not its bombs, not its ships, but its systems. The ability to provide hot water and soap to thousands of captives in the middle of a world war revealed an industrial capacity beyond comprehension. It showed them a civilization not merely of soldiers, but of infrastructure, and once they saw it, they could never unsee it. In this way, the showers transcended their immediate purpose. They became a metaphor for everything the war had truly been about. Two visions of order colliding, one built on sacrifice and spirit, the other on abundance and structure. The men who stood beneath those pipes lived that collision on their own skin. They felt the warmth of a world that had defeated them not only through firepower, but through organization, through the quiet insistence that cleanliness and care were forms of strength. Years later, when those men were old and grey, some still remembered the sensation with startling clarity. The sound of the water, the smell of soap, the first moment they realized it was not a trick. They would tell their grandchildren that the first time they understood what modernity meant was not when they saw airplanes or radios or tanks, but when they stepped beneath an American shower and felt endless hot water pour over their shoulders. Because in that moment, stripped of everything, they saw what their own commanders had never taught them, that civilization was not measured by how fiercely one fought, but by how deeply one cared for the simple dignity of being clean. The war had taken everything from them, honor, homeland, comrades, but the showers had given something back, a lesson in humanity delivered not through words but through warmth and water. And so, for the rest of their lives, those who had once feared the hiss of American pipes would remember it as the sound of survival, the sound of a world that had changed them forever.